Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel as we roll through the off season and we begin the Jaxson Dart era with the New York Giants. I've been trying to talk to as many quarterback gurus, quarterback knowledgeable people as I possibly can. And today I have a really special guest, a guy that knows and understands quarterback play better than just about anybody. Welcome to Jordan Palmer of QB Summit. Jordan, thank you so much for a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So just want to clarify so folks know, you've worked with a lot of guys. You've worked with Josh Allen. You've worked with Joe Burrow. You've worked with Trevor Lawrence, Sam Darnold, a lot of other guys. You have not worked specifically with Jaxson, so it's a little bit of a perspective from afar as we talk about Jaxson Dart.
Yeah, it is. I'm happy to talk about him because I've got a lot of good things to say. If I didn't, I wouldn't. If I didn't have anything good to say, I wouldn't have said anything at all, right?
Oh, there you go. Your mom trained you well.
Yeah, just like all the Giants fans, right? If they don't have something nice to say, they don't say anything at all, right?
I wish.
Yeah,
So let's get your let's start by getting your sort of Jaxson Dart scouting report, your take on whether the Giants made a good decision here, to go get the young man.
Well, I think I like this fit of Jaxson, and it's less about the Giants. It's more about the offense, who's teaching him football, and then lastly would be the pieces around him in the huddle. But I like the marriage of this offensive staff and Jaxson Dart, which is kind of how I look at it, right?
Right.
And I don't have an opinion on the picks and what it costs to get him and all that. That's not my world. But I really like this marriage between Jaxson and Brian Daboll and his staff. Because I do see a lot of things in Jackson's game, and as you mentioned, I don't work with Jaxson, but I certainly look at the game differently. I break down every single guy in the draft. I have my own draft grades. I get them notarized. I've been right a lot more than I've been wrong, and I was really high on Jaxson. There's a lot of stuff that you do in college that, from a scheme perspective, that you can get rewarded for in college by putting up big numbers and being prolific, and then you can be penalized for it in the NFL because it's not really how they do it in the NFL, right? Now this used to be, back when I played, and earlier than that, it was a lot more pronounced. And case in point, my older brother Carson Palmer, he was the number one pick in the draft, and he did not play a snap his rookie year, and he was healthy. The main reason was because they wanted to let him sit and learn an NFL offense for a year. Well, boy, have times changed since 2003, right?
Right.
When you're kind of expected to get on the field right away. And so, we see Tyler Shuck is in an open competition for the starting job as a second round pick. And we might see depending on what Aaron Rodgers does, we might see Will Howard in an open competition for the starting job with Pittsburgh as a 6th round pick. So times have changed. And I think when you come out of Lane Kiffin's system, there's a lot of things that make it prolific, which is why people want to go there out of high school and why they want to transfer there out of the portal to play for him. Aside from the guy that Lane Kiffin is, and the atmosphere he's created, scheme wise, there's a lot of reads that are one side. Get the ball out quick, read one key one defender, and then they go recruit talented wideouts, and away we go. Where you'll oftentimes get penalized for that in the NFL because not all that stuff works in the league, and you got to put more on the quarterback's plate. Well, I think that's pretty standard, and so I don't look at it and go, oh, I don't like that player in the draft, or he's drafted too high because that's the case. I think that's the case everywhere to some extent. But what I really like about this marriage is that I've seen in my work with Josh Allen, Brian Daboll's ability to teach. Now, Giants fans have their opinion on Brian, wherever it is, and it's largely tied to win-loss record, maybe a couple of situations, not even ones I'm thinking of, just, fans have opinions. But what doesn't get seen is his ability to teach. And at the end of the day, yeah, I'm a quarterback coach. I don't use the word guru. I'm a quarterback coach, but at the end of the day, I'm a teacher.
Right.
We're in class. I just got out of class. I just had 3 college guys leave my office, right? And I've seen Brian Daboll be one of, and honestly, if not the best at teaching the game. And I don't mean installing the offense and explaining what we want on this play. I mean teaching the game and the situational side of it, when to be aggressive, when not, and just meet guys where they're at. And I've seen it with Josh, I've seen it with other guys. I kind of have felt through this Daniel Jones era and everything that's been happening of late with the Giants, like as a fan of Brian Daboll's, I just kind of have felt for a couple of years, I can't wait until Brian can get his guy that he picked, that he brought in, whether that's in free agency or the draft. Like, I can't wait till he can come in and start from scratch with somebody and just teach, because I think he's one of the best teachers in the game.
Yeah, it's funny because you're not the only one who says that. Dan Orlovsky of ESPN, says something similar. Todd McShay, now with the Ringer, says something similar. And it's just interesting with the Giants. It feels in a lot of ways it's year 4 for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, but it feels like a reset. It feels like, finally he's got his guy to work with. And it really feels like a sort of a new beginning for the Giants. Just, that's really not your thing, but does it kind of feel the same way for you?
It does. And even with Malik Neighbors, as exciting as he was last year, and I don't know the numbers in front of me, but he was one of the best rookies playing last year. It's year 2 with these receivers.
Right.
Year 1, I mean, they spent the majority of their offseason. Think about Malik Neighbors 12 months ago, what he just got done doing. He just got done training hours a week for the 40.
Mm-hmm.
And for the pro agility and for the L drill. And because you have to, you're going through the draft process. So you have to prepare for the events that you're going to get tested on. And so I feel like wide receivers, even if somebody comes in and has a great rookie year, I expect big things their second year, because now they got to rest, right? So Malik Neighbors had a long season at LSU, then went right into draft. And I don't know Malik. I'm just saying, like, I do draft prep. I have receivers out here. This is what they do, right?
Right. You've seen it. You've done it. Right.
I run it for the guys. And so with Malik, he finishes at LSU and immediately goes into preparing for the draft, and then gets drafted. And now all of a sudden, poof, rookie minicamp, throw an offense at you. Okay, now we go into OTAs, and now we're going to go to have a minicamp. Okay, you get a little bit of time off in June, but you got to stay in shape, by the way. And so, like, all of a sudden, training camp. Okay, you got some quarterback drama there, right? And it's New York, and it's the media. You don't have media like that at LSU. Okay, so I just look at a Malik Neighbors and I go, yeah, last year was year 1, but this is year 1. This is his first year where he gets to be a vet and come in and prepare for the season only. The only thing he's been doing this offseason, I would assume, has been resting, recovering, and preparing for the upcoming season. That's not what happens your rookie year. And so with Jaxson, regardless of when he becomes the starter, whether that's week 1 or year 2, and anything in between, I feel like that. Yeah, I'm a Brian Daboll fan. I'm not a Giants fan.
Right.
I don't have a team. I'm a fan of people. I'm a big Brian Daboll fan, and yeah, this really does feel like a really good reset. And with Russell Wilson in the room, regardless of who starts and takes all the snaps this year, Russell Wilson's a lot of things, but 2 things come to mind when I think of Russell. One, he's a winner. In a world of stats that I don't care about, he's got a relevant stat. His first 8 years in the NFL, he won more games than anybody. There's a bunch of stats I don't care about. That's a good one. I care about that one, right? How often you win, that's a good one. The second thing that's just true about Russell Wilson, whether you like him or not, right? That's just true about him is he is a pro. He approaches his offseason, his body, his mental and emotional state, his throwing mechanic. He's all in all the time. And so I just look at it and I go, okay, so Jackson's going to be in the room with Brian Daboll and a guy who's a winner and conducts himself at an elite, like, professional level. Well, that's a good. If my son is picking colleges, I want him to go to that college. I want you to learn from those people.
Yeah, and I mean, Jameis Winston is sandwiched in the middle in there somewhere, and Jameis Winston is a former number 1 pick who's in some ways an example of how a career can go sideways, and maybe Jaxson benefits, or maybe any rookie benefits from that perspective as well. You have a thought on that?
Yeah, and it slipped my mind that the Jameis is in there too. Jameis is a pro too. Jameis has really evolved into a guy who really takes care of his body and really invests in the offseason. But I think Jameis is an example of a guy who's just unapologetically himself at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And he's goofy and he's silly and he's super funny. I've been around him since he was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't changed at all, right? Through all the success, and he's a Heisman
Mm-hmm.
Trophy winning #1 pick, wealthy young man, with a great family.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you add him in the room, and you're like, okay, here's somebody who's unapologetically themselves. That takes a lot of confidence to be unapologetically yourself. By the way, that
Mm-hmm.
can be inferred as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Right.
It takes a lot of confidence to do that. And I just think it's a great class, a great room.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think about it in terms of teaching. So I think it's a great class with great professors in the room. And Russell's a selfless guy. I know he helps young guys, and Jameis is as well. And so I just think it's fertile ground that Jaxson just stepped foot in.
Jordan, I want to talk about quarterback development a little bit. And I guess I want to start, obviously you worked extensively and still work with Josh Allen, and there are, people will read scouting reports and say, oh, Brian Dable was attracted to Jaxson Dart because he has this trait or that trait or whatever trait that reminds him of Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a unicorn. I've heard you and I've seen you say that he might be the most talented quarterback physically to ever play the game. So I think
It was funny. I
putting
said that during the draft, and Sports Illustrated took that quote, posted it on Instagram. Boy, that comment section was relentless. And it's just absolutely true.
And so my point is, if you're expecting Jaxson to be Josh Allen, then you're kind of setting the kid up to fail. But my point that I want to talk about, with the two guys is in terms of quarterback development. And you talked about Brian Dable, and Dable also has Mike Kafka, who was part of Patrick Mahomes' development in Kansas City. What does an NFL coach do, for a young quarterback versus, what you and others who do the kinds of things that you do, in the off season? What's the difference in terms of training and what guys can benefit from and learn from, from a guy like you, on field versus a guy like Daboll or other NFL coaches?
Well, I think there's an evolution happening in quarterback development. And just for context, I exist in the space very differently than anybody else. Every single one of my clients is on an annual retainer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do sessions. I no longer am doing kids camps. I've got over 20 college starting quarterbacks on an annual retainer, a handful of NFL starters, and a lot of backups. And so what I've noticed is the old way of thinking, and this is true for every position, but I'll just say quarterback, of go out there in the offseason and give it your all, get better, work on things, improve, get in great shape by the end of July, peak in July. And then when the season comes around, it's a long season, you're going to be banged up. You just try and maintain as much as you can throughout the season. That's certainly what I did as a player. Certainly what the
Mm-hmm.
guys that I backed up did as a player.
Physically.
Physically.
Right.
I just think it's
Mm-hmm.
evolved. We should be peaking in January. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I say I'm on retainer, I mean all of my clients, I am doing FaceTime, or I do these, I stand in front of my golf simulator, I pull up their clips, I break them down, we give demonstrations, I curate what happens in individual period, I curate what they do before and after practice, and I do that throughout the entire season. So
Okay.
in spring ball and in training camp, I'm watching practice tape. In season, I'm
Mm-hmm.
watching game tape, and I'm regurgitating that back each week with over 35 clients. I've got a team of people here. And so going back to Jaxson, what should the quarterback development do be around him? Because again, we just mentioned the other two guys that he has in the room with him. You made a great point. Mike Kafka, one of the emerging offensive brilliant minds in this league, former player, been around it. It's not like that he's coached before. He's part of Patrick Mahomes' early development,
Right.
right? Brian Dable and the other coaches I don't even know about who are great.
Right.
And then Jaxson Dart throws with a group called 3D QB out not too far from me. They do a great job. They work with a ton of NFL players. They're fantastic at what they do. The challenge is going to be how is that integrated throughout one cohesive plan throughout the course of the year, and not throughout the course of the year. Look at it like the next 5 years. How
Mm-hmm.
do you build one cohesive plan? So here's what happens. I'm going to get really, I don't know, the people who are listening to
Sure.
this right now are going to go, I don't follow that, or they're going to be super into this conversation. We'll
Go
see.
for it.
So What I do sometimes for organizations is come in and I call it interdepartmental communications consulting. Okay. Now I have a business background. I built and sold a company. We made silicone wedding rings. Okay. We
Hmm.
created the silicone wedding ring category, sold $200 million worth of silicone wedding rings, and I sold the business. And then I
Hmm.
ran a marketing agency, digital marketing, e-commerce agency called Common Thread Collective, which has 150 employees today. So I've
Hmm.
been a part of consulting for a long time. And what I noticed in the traditional business world is if I'm a brand, okay, and I make apparel, if my product development team, the people making the clothes, okay, and my marketing team, the people coming up with the strategies for how we're going to tell everybody about this, and then my e-commerce team are not on the same page, or my sales team who handles retail relationships and sales, if those four departments aren't on the same page, right, then we need to have a consultant come in for interdepartmental communications consulting. We have to build better systems and processes between each department, even though it's the same company. Maybe it's Florence, right, surf company, but those departments are not synchronized. What I've learned, and this is all 32 teams and every college outside of my current clients, where the departments are not synced between what happens in the physical therapy, so the training room, what happens in the weight room, and then what happens with the quarterback coach. So what I traditionally see is the quarterback coach has never really been in the physical therapy room. He has no idea. In fact, can't really name those body parts. He doesn't know what the obliques do. Okay, because it never came up for him. And then the
Hmm.
physical therapist only sees hurt people. Okay, and then the strength coach has never sat in the quarterback room before. He doesn't know what we're like mechanically they're talking about. His job is increase good body composition, decrease body fat, get your numbers up, get this number down, right? And so what happens is you can have three departments that are the best in the world at what they do, but if they're not synchronized and cohesive and working together, then I think you put a ceiling on the development and the rate of development for your quarterback.
Right. If
And so
they're
what I
not,
come into,
I was just going to say, if they're not necessarily understanding what the quarterback does, what he needs, how his body
well,
needs
then
to
mixed in,
function,
if
those
he goes,
kinds of things.
Jaxson goes back home and throws with his private quarterback coach, and again, they do an unbelievable job, and that's not integrated into the simple cues and what to do and not to do, and it's not reinforced on a daily basis throughout OTAs, then what's the point?
Right.
And so that was why I stopped doing what I was doing before, which is what other folks do in the space. And I started going, no, we're on retainer for the year, and this is either going to go fantastic or it's not going, or your coaches aren't going to be okay with it. And I have no issues with it, and no issues with coaches anywhere. It's really well received. But what I do is I come in and I go, no, you start doing physical therapy 3 days a week. Let me get on the phone with the physical therapist and explain mechanically what this guy's working on. And so you synchronize those departments around them. Well, when you become a rookie first round pick in the NFL, you're in the best position to do that because you have all the leverage to say, can my guy come in here for 3 days and work with us? Can we get that? Can you guys talk, please? And the answer is yes. And
Hmm.
so this is the best time, not just for Jaxson, but for the Giants to really sync those departments and make sure that for 12 months in a row, this kid, every room he goes in, whether there's weights in it, whether there's rehab equipment in it, whether there's a clicker and a screen, whether it's a field and balls, whether he's back home from every single room he steps in for 12 months, he's hearing consistent cues, consistent belief structure, consistent ideology while he's learning the offense, building relationships with guys, tweaking mechanics, getting stronger, getting faster, all the things that you need to do. I just, to put a button on it, I think everybody's in one of two groups. They're all in on no plan, or they're all in on one plan. All in on no plan is you go in the weight room and you bust your butt. You go in the film room and you study. You go, you eat good. And then you practice hard. Like you're doing all the things, they're just not synchronized.
Hmm.
And then I've got clients that are all in on one plan.
Right. And obviously, if you're on one plan and you're hearing the same message and your workout is geared toward the right things instead of just regular benchmarks for everybody, then that's obviously or should be better for the individual.
Yeah, and it's crazy. So again, I reference my business background because when I say interdepartmental communications consulting, there's people who are business people listening to this right now that are like, yeah, I know what that is. Right? When
Hmm.
I talk about this with NFL front offices and college leadership, they're like, what? It's like groundbreaking.
Hmm.
I've had people tell me what I'm doing is genius. I'm like, what I'm doing is genius? This is
Hmm.
exactly what they've been doing in baseball for a decade. I
Hmm.
literally copied it. It's
Mhm.
exactly what the swing coaches in golf do, not the
Mhm.
caddies, the swing coach.
Mhm.
The top players in the world also have a swing coach. They
Mhm.
synchronize everything. And
Mhm.
so this is unfortunately a new novel thing that's actually traditionally been around in other industries for a long time. And yeah, and my business has really shifted and evolved. And that's why I really handpick who I work with.
Mhm.
Not that everybody wants to train with me, but handpick, because you got to be in a position to be able to go all in on a plan if we do build the right one.
Right. So the NFL is moving toward that, but moving slower than a lot of other leagues and industries. Then.
Yeah, I think quarterback development is at least 10 years behind baseball and probably 15 behind golf.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if I were to talk to a quarterback coach in the NFL and say that we're working on a quarterback's kinematic throwing sequence, pelvis rotation, trunk rotation, elbow extension, and internal shoulder rotation, and then we measure it in degrees per second, the angular velocity, and we're trying to get a 20% increase on the pelvic rotation to increase the velocity of his trunk rotation, a quarterback coach would go, "What? What did you say?"
Mhm. Mhm.
In golf, that's how they talk.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we're way behind. And so that's why there's an amazing opportunity for me building my business. I mean, the most expensive problem in all of sports globally is your quarterback sucks.
Mhm.
It's the most expensive problem.
Yep.
Okay. The
And
only one more expensive than that is if you pay the wrong guy. And I can
right.
think of a couple.
Right.
Um,
And of course, I was just going to say situation matters so much for quarterbacks. And you talked about, loving the idea of Jaxson Dart working with Brian Daboll. Josh worked with Brian Daboll. Um, Sam Darnold didn't have that same situation. Maybe Sam Darnold is in a different place in his career if he has a better situation when he comes into the league.
I'm
Um,
100% convinced of that.
I'm just curious, the the NFL success rate. I've looked at it. If you define success rate as quote unquote solid starter, I think the success rate is somewhere in the 30s percentage wise in terms of guys drafted in the first round since 2010. At least that's by my study, by my calculation. Um, is some of what we're talking about here a big reason for that?
Yeah. The NFL has a quarterback. I'm not the first person to say this. I think I am. I just hear people say it more now.
Mm-hmm.
But they have a quarterback development problem, not a quarterback evaluation problem.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly people whiff on picks and take, there's been some guys selected high that I had as like a 6th round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And then turned out I was right. But
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely much more of a developmental problem. Um, and it's just like if you think about doing business, doing good business, if I'm going to strike a partnership with you, okay, we're going to do our own podcast together. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The foundational elements of you and I starting our own podcast together, let's say podcast network, let's make it more businessy. Okay. Our
Mm-hmm.
own podcast network together. The foundational elements of it have to be that our interests are aligned, right? And I know people. I had a former business partner who wasn't trying to make a ton of money. He was trying to make an impact. People would think he's crazy, but like he was fundamentally trying to make an impact and develop young talent and get paid commensurate, but he wasn't trying to crush it and sell the company for a ton of money. So at the foundational element, our interests have to be aligned, right? You need to want to grow what you're doing and have more upside. And philosophically, we either need to agree or we need to think that we're both a good combination of each other of what we disagree on. You know what I mean? So like the interests have to be aligned. And I just think the interests aren't always aligned. If you've got a GM who's got 1 year left, maybe sometimes people reach and take quarterbacks. Same with the
Mm-hmm.
head coach,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you've got, if you're Carolina and you got to give up your only good receiver to move up in the draft to select a quarterback in Bryce Young, I don't know if those interests are aligned. I don't know if we're
Right.
putting him in a position to succeed, right? And there's a
Mm-hmm.
million examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think a lot of times the selection, who made the pick, you never really know who made the pick, but like, was it the owner? Was it the general manager? Was it the quarterback? And so I just think a lot of times there's so many moving parts between the staff and the uh, the job security they have, the current quarterback room, plus the salary cap, plus all those things where there's so many moving parts and elements that to be able to draft the right guy into the right situation at the right time, I, it's hard. And
It,
some people are better at it than others. Most are not very good at it. And then do you have the developmental plan around them outside of who they're throwing to and who's blocking for them? Do you have the developmental plan for them? And then lastly, I would say, and this is where interests are aligned. Does the organization have the let me think of the right word. Does the organization have the right patience for that quarterback's development? And does that quarterback have enough resilience to be able to get through the hard times? Because when you think about Josh Allen, most people think of highlight plays, MVP, how good he is. They don't
mhm,
realize for 2 years, it was hard for him. It was
mhm.
struggling. They also don't realize that his first year, you know who his number one wide receiver was his rookie year?
Who was it?
Kelvin Benjamin.
Oh boy,
His whole
Kelvin
rookie year.
Benjamin.
Okay.
Uh,
Not fresh out of college, Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin
mhm,
Benjamin at 250, Kelvin Benjamin.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if Buffalo, and I'm sure there was fans that didn't have patience, but if Buffalo and Brandon Beane and the coaching staff there didn't have the patience to get through that developmental phase and speed it up by teaching them good stuff and doing a great job, and Brandon Beane and co. building the right pieces. It was year 3 when he took a step. It was also year 3 when they added Stephon Diggs. It was also
Mhm,
year 3 when they got, a good center in there, right? And so it was the patience of the organization along with the resilience of the quarterback. Though that's the other interest that timeline has to be the same too. And when I say resilience, like you got to be able to be 23 years old and go on social media and hear a bunch of people talk trash about how terrible you are and not give a crap about it. And I'm,
mhm.
I'm just telling you, I know a lot of quarterbacks, and I don't, and not all of them can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Does there, with all of the things that you're talking about here, I think about the fact that you and so many others have talked about Brian Daboll and his ability to coach quarterbacks. Um, and yet, I do think that this was a pick that Brian Daboll very much endorsed, just from some of what you see, even from the Giants' own social media team. I think this was a pick that Brian Daboll was very, very happy with. Um, the danger for Jaxson Dart, of course, is that the Giants have had 2 really bad years in a row. Um, how devastating is it for a young quarterback like that when there's organizational upheaval, in terms of, coaching staffs getting replaced, the GM getting replaced? How difficult is that, for a young QB's development timeline?
I think it's dependent on the new staff coming in. If the question is how hard is it for a young quarterback to deal with a coaching staff change, I think
Mhm.
it's dependent on the new staff coming in, because if the new staff coming in is not great, or however you want to frame it, right? Like struggles with infrastructure and systems that aren't in place, right? Because it takes a second, or is the wrong demeanor or whatever, then it's really hard and it's like damn near impossible.
Mhm.
If the new staff comes in and is on it, and this is a group that's been
Mhm.
waiting for this opportunity, and they got their staff assembled and all that stuff, it can be a quick transition, right? So I look
Mhm.
at I'm fascinated this season to watch the Chicago Bears. I can't wait to watch Caleb Williams take a step after his really first and only year where he hasn't just completely dominated, right? Since he was
Mhm.
little. I'm excited to see that. But I'm excited to see Ben Johnson come in, and are they going to have it squared away right away and roll and pick up and go? We've seen it before.
Mhm.
Is this going to take a year or two?
Mhm.
And so I think it's more indicative of the new staff, coming in.
Mhm.
And that was why the expectations were so high for Jim Harbaugh last year, is because aside from who Jim Harbaugh is, his name, he's got a track record of like being good the first year,
Mhm.
right? Being good at Stanford the first year, being good at San Diego the first year, being good at the Niners the first year, right? And so that
Mhm.
was why it's like, well, a lot of people picked them to have a great year, right? And they had a lot of injuries, but they did have a great year in a lot of things. The defense was
Mhm.
completely turned around, you know?
Mhm.
And so I think it's more about that. But I don't see that with the Giants. I think whenever Jaxson Dart's really ready, he's going to play at a high level. And I think they have 2 other guys in that room who, if they either of those guys start week 1, I think they're going to play at a high level. I think they got a lot of playmakers. Um, and I think the Giants are going to be good this year. I don't foresee, coaching changes with New York. I don't know it like you do, clearly, or like the
Mhm.
people who are watching this right now. But I think it's like you said, it feels like year 1 with Brian Daboll and the Giants. And I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, and I'll just put this out there, I think it's the best roster that the Giants have had in the Shane Daboll era. And in the 4 years, I think it's the best quarterback room. It's the best defense. It's the best roster overall. It's also a brutally difficult schedule. So it's how quickly, I guess, all of it can come together. But I'm curious to ask you, we talked about how quickly a lot of quarterbacks are playing now. You talked about your brother sitting for a year. Um, are you a play the guy right away? Are you the guy, a quarterback should benefit from sitting? Or are you, the situation just depends on the situation and who's around him and all of that? Where do you stand on how quickly a kid should play?
I think there's three things a rookie has to do to either find success, or if I was a coach, to feel good about putting them in there.
Mm-hmm.
They're all subjective, so I don't have data around this. But I think one, they've got to have an understanding enough of an understanding around the offense they're running. You're not going to know everything, but enough of an understanding of what we're trying to do on each play, how we're going to block it up, where we're going with the ball, and a good enough understanding of what they're doing on defense to be able to go through my progressions. If a quarterback is dropping back and going, wait, which side's the dig on? You could be mad at him for not knowing that, but don't put him out there. Don't do
Mm-hmm.
that. Maybe he's just not ready. That's fine. Doesn't
Right.
mean he's not going to be great, but he's not ready yet. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
do we understand on offense and defense what's happening enough to be able to go to the right place with the ball? If number one comes open, I'm not looking at the other side of the field. Like I'm number one, not number one neighbors, but number one like in the
Right.
progression,
Right.
right? Like
Number one
I
in your
know where I'm supposed to
progression.
go with the ball. This
Right.
coverage, I'm there. Right? Okay. So like not 100% of the time, right? But they gotta do that. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is they've got to be mobile enough to be able to get themselves out of bad situations. That does not mean they have to run a certain 40 time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's movement in the pocket, right? We watched Ben Roethlisberger run a 5 flat for 17 years and no one could tackle him. So
Right.
maybe it's buying time in the pocket. Maybe it's buying time leaving the pocket, but they've got to
Right.
be able to get themselves out of a bad situation, because when you get really talented defensive coordinators and really talented defenders playing against rookie quarterbacks, they're just going to win with confusion a lot. It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So can we get ourselves out of a bad spot? And then the third thing is, are these lights too bright? And, you know, Jaxson Dart plays at Ole Miss in the SEC. Well, he may never play. He's never going to play in a stadium ever again that has as many people in it that Tennessee does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Right.
not so much like the stage and the amount of people at the game. It's just all of it. The media, the
Right.
New York, how important everything is. You throw a duck in practice, and now it's like going viral on the internet, and you got to deal with that, right? So it's all the. I'm oversimplifying saying, are the lights too bright?
No, I get it. I
Sometimes
get
guys
it.
got to sit in this for a year,
Mm-hmm.
right? And every market's different. I had this really interesting perspective where I played 1 year with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the next year I played for the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, these are two different leagues.
Mm.
Literally, there's 15 people at our training camp practice in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
There's 15,000 at our training camp practice in Bourbonnais, Illinois, an hour and a half outside of Chicago every
Mm-hmm.
day.
Yep.
Media, there's 2 reporters that have a quick question. There's 100 people in the room, and they're all yelling at me. You know what I mean? It was just such a trip to go, like, same level, same league,
Mm-hmm.
2 completely different experiences.
Right.
And so we talk about New York, those lights are brighter. And so those 3 things, do they know what's happening enough to be able to take care of the ball and go to the right spot with it? Are they mobile enough to get out of bad situations? And then are the lights too bright? And maybe they need a month or 2, maybe they need a year, and maybe they don't need any time at all.
I thought it was interesting with Jaxson when we had a chance to talk to him for the first time in his rookie minicamp media session. I mean, he walked into the room, and the first thing he said was, "Please introduce yourself before you ask a question, so that I can put a name to a face." And I thought that was a very mature, thing for a 21 or 22-year-old young man to do. So I thought it was a
It
good
was either
sign.
really mature for a 21-year-old man, it was a good job by the sports information director, or it was a smart comment by his agent. One of the 3.
Yeah, one of the 3, but it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
No, but it's the right
So,
way. And like
right,
everything I've seen, to be honest with you, Ed, I don't do a ton of interviews, and this one is about a client I don't train, and or
right,
a player I don't train, and like, but when this was set up, I was like, no, I'd love to talk about Jaxson Dart because I
right.
literally don't know him. I've
Mhm,
watched almost every snap he's played. I know everybody who trains him, guys who played with them. I got two
mhm,
clients that backed him up last year. Like I know a lot about this kid,
mhm,
and I had conversations with teams, before
mhm,
the drafts about him, about different
mhm.
players.
Yep,
And I said, yeah, I wanted to do this because I genuinely feel like it's a great fit. And I got a couple buddies that are diehard Giants fans, and like you guys should have something to be excited about right now for sure.
Yeah, the Giants fans could use some excitement. Absolutely. Jordan,
Yeah.
I wanted to just thank you. I think that's a pretty good place for us to wrap.
Can I give a piece of advice real quick?
Sure.
This is to any Giants fans that don't like this pick. Okay.
Mhm.
So there's inevitably, maybe they're watching this, they just can't believe we did that, right? We should have done
Right.
this. Okay.
Mhm.
So I've heard this because I hear these stories all the time, right? From being around Buffalo, and so I played there kind of for a minute, but been around and all that stuff. And there are just Bills Mafia fans out there. Okay. I know a couple by
Right.
name
Mhm.
that hated the Josh Allen pick and were real vocal about it. Right.
Mhm.
Even if just in their friend group, not talking about the internet, just
Mhm.
vocal about it. And for the rest of their lives, they're held accountable to something they said back in 2017 because they thought the guy from Wyoming wasn't going to be good, right? So all this is advice to Giants fans who don't like the pick. I would exercise the right to remain silent and not be vocal about how terrible Jaxson Dart's going to be, because I know enough Giants and Jets fans to know that if one of your buddies does something stupid, you're going to hear about it for the rest of your life. And so, just a little piece
Well,
of advice to anybody who doesn't like this pick: go ahead and just roll with the idea of, I thought that back in the day. I just didn't say it if he ends up not being
right.
good, but I think he's going to be good.
Well, you know, I go back and I wasn't covering the Giants at this point in time, but I go back to Eli Manning in 2004. I mean, his first practice of rookie camp, he couldn't hit the broadside of the barn with the ball. You know, so and people were like, even John Mara was like, "Oh my God, what have we done here?" And I think the thing that people want instant gratification. They want to judge the first time they see somebody. And I think the cautionary tale is the guy's not going to be in year one. Josh Allen's a great example. He's not going to be in year one, what he turns into in year three. I think that's a great example that maybe you can speak to.
This league is year to year. It
Mm-hmm.
is 100% year to year. I mean, it goes both ways. How about CJ Stroud's second year? They fired the
Mm-hmm.
offensive coordinator
Mm-hmm.
after his rookie year. That guy was getting head coaching interviews.
Mm-hmm.
It is year to year. Caleb Williams could be MVP this year.
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Daniels could really struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that'll happen, but like it absolutely could. Will
Mm-hmm.
Howard could go off as the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like it is
Mm-hmm.
so year to year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's pressure on all these guys,
Mm-hmm.
but I've got clients that are some of the highest paid players in the NFL right now, and the pressure is when they do give you 50, or in some cases
Mm-hmm.
59. The expectation is that next year is going to be better, and
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys that I work with, he won the MVP, and the other guy was runner up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other guy was like runner up to that, right? Sam, Joe,
Mm-hmm.
and Josh, and it's like these guys aren't carrying the momentum of last year into next year. It's a new year. They know how hard it
Right.
is to win. That's when you go back in our conversation. I said that Russell Wilson won more games in his first 8 seasons than anybody ever. That's why that's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Not more games his rookie year than any other rookie.
Because he did it for 8 years.
Great year.
He
But
did it
like
for 8 years. Right.
8 years. That's not the same team. It's not
Mm-hmm.
even the same team year to year. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just think it's really, really difficult, and you got to compartmentalize it and look at it like year to year. And
Mm-hmm.
what am I adding to my game? What am I going to take out of my game? And
Mm-hmm.
how am I going to fill leadership voids that we're losing due to free agency, retirement, or trades?
Just out of curiosity, I wasn't going to ask you this, but what do you think of what sort of quarterback Russ is at this point in his career versus that early portion of his career?
Mm, I don't know. I didn't watch enough of him last year to have a real concrete opinion.
Hmm.
Um, but I think he's the experience that he has. There's just like no look, play, coverage, front that he just couldn't hit pause and tell you every single thing that everybody's doing on that.
Hmm.
So whatever he's lost that you lose at this age, whether that's the amount of force you can put in the ground, your ability to change direction, velocity, exit velocity, like whatever the things are that start to come undone for you as you get older. I think we've seen with Tom Brady. I think we've seen with Aaron Rodgers. I think we'll see again with Aaron Rodgers. That you can offset those now deficiencies with the unique capability of that experience. And
Hmm.
so I think if Russ plays in a good situation, that he's got a chance to be in every single game with a chance to make a run at the end. So I think that I don't think that about everybody, but I think that about him. And if he ends up winning the job and being the guy, I think it'll be because he outplayed, Jameis Winston, who's a really good player, and Jaxson Dart, who's, a high draft pick and gonna be a really good player. So whoever starts for the Giants, I think is gonna have won a really good competition and earned it. And that's not the case everywhere.
Hey, Jordan, as I said, I really appreciate your time. Why don't you, let folks know, where they can, where they can learn about QB Summit, where they can, and where they can find more of your work.
Yeah, I train college and NFL, but I have a program coming out called Summit U. It'll be dropping in June. Built a one-of-a-kind online training program. QBSummit.com is the best way to find me, or Jordan Palmer on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. And if you're a parent, I co-founded at a company last year. We're 8 months old, called Thread Performance, and we're the only company making really clean nutritional products for young athletes with developing bodies. Believe it or not, there was not a single company on the market that was making products designed for athletes going through puberty. It is a hot start. It's a rocket ship right now. We've been blown away. But we're 8 months in, and we've got almost 2,000 people on a monthly subscription right now, and it's growing. So yeah, check out threadperformance.com as well if you're a parent of a young athlete.
All right, Jordan, thank you so much. Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.